Well, good afternoon and welcome back, everybody, to the second session of our Successful Investing 3 series of webcasts. Today's session will basically treat the subject of taking themes or topics and drilling into them to the extent that you can find suitable stocks for study. So that's basically what we're going to cover. My name is Mark Robertson. I'm founder and managing partner of Manifest Investing. And I'm joined here by, again, our favorite investing raconteur, Ken Kavula. The raconteur is back, and Ken is renowned for his investment efforts nationally. You may recognize his voice from Ticker Talk, and Ken and I both participate in a number of chapter and national programs that are affiliated with the Modern Investment Club movement. So this is, I added a Periscope to this. I used to call this topic Periscope, and we threw an otter on the screen there just for friendliness. Any other thoughts, Ken?
Nope, I'm ready to go, Mark.
All right, we do have a hard stop on this one because we have another class in an hour, so we do have to roll. So here's the legal paperwork. No investment recommendation is intended or implied. This is about education. We are using case studies and illustrations to demonstrate the techniques and methods and philosophies of the Modern Investment Club movement as they have been championed and promulgated by either NAIC Better Investing or Manifest Investing. Anything that you hear today is our opinion. Please do your own homework. We try to remember to tell you if we actually hold a stock that we're talking about in personal portfolios or portfolios that we're familiar with. We do a number of educational sessions. If you'd like to be added to our email list for reminders, send an email to nkavula1@comcast.net. If you have follow-up questions or would like copies of the slides, they are also posted in the Manifest Investing forum, but send me an email, markr@manifestinvesting.com. Here's where we're at in the second of 5 sessions. We want to take themes and turn them into study targets for study and potential ownership and stewardship. So let's go ahead and keep rolling. Ken, I kind of threw this slide together. When the topic was suggested by multiple people that we hang with in this community, we keep hearing questions about, this particular topic or theme is hot. Why don't you guys go after it? And I think we've done a fairly decent job here of collecting up a lot of the fairly current hot topics. Your thoughts?
Well, Mark, I love to make an analogy between topics and investing and writing papers for a class at the university level. I've been having direct experience with university students again recently because my 3 grandkids have been moving through the years. We finally have one graduating, and then they're going to be followed pretty quickly out the door with mortarboards and tassels. But in the beginning, it was so difficult to listen to them on the phone tell us that they were going to write a paper that my wife and I both knew the scope was so broad and so global that they weren't going to be able to condense anything to 8 or 10 or 12 pages, which was the assignment that was made. Same thing's true in investing. I go to a club and they say, well, what's a good infrastructure play? Well, what do you mean by infrastructure? Can you narrow that down? Can you think a little bit more about what kind of infrastructure you're talking about? What size of company do you want? And if you can do some thinking along those lines, I think you have a much better chance of entering into some of these ideas without having to try to study everything that's involved with the idea, whatever it happens to be.
Yeah, and I get some of the same questions when I visit clubs, and we've run into them, and we've talked about cannabis investing. We've talked about alternative energy. Electric vehicles is something we're probably going to dig into in much greater detail, searching for that perhaps overlooked opportunity that crosses all the various spectrums of opportunity. E-commerce is an area that's catching on big time, and that's cross-connected to a lot of different stuff. I can remember going to the ATM machine fairly often, and I go there like once a month now. That's how often we spend cash. The world is changing, and that's going to be part of the message here today. How do you recognize where the change is, hopefully positive change, and how do you take advantage of it? I mean, the cybersecurity one that's down at the bottom of the page, that's very timely with what's going on with the failure to deliver gasoline to the East Coast right now. It's a big topic, cybersecurity.
I think some of the jargon is important also, Mark. You have to listen carefully. ESG is something that's out there, and when you listen to your financial news channels or you read financial news, you see ESG prominently featured in a lot of talk and in a lot of articles that are available. Well, you have to know what it means, what it's measuring, what are the positive things about ESG, what might be some of the negatives that are associated with ESG. None of these trends are completely positive or completely negative, and you have to do a little bit of digging to make sure that you're moving in a direction that eventually is going to help a portfolio put some money together to make you a nest egg. That's the purpose of investing as an individual, at least. And I would hate to see somebody invest for 40 or 50 years and end up with a good warm feeling in their heart, but $3 in the bank. So it's important.
Yeah, I mean, I go back to helping to start an investment club in the basement of a church in Elgin, Illinois, over 30 years ago. And well, maybe not quite 30 years ago, 25 years ago. And they were definitely at the forefront of ESG. They declared to me they didn't want any adult beverage or tobacco stocks in the portfolio. I said, I get that. I did proceed to show them, what Philip Morris, what they were giving up by not going there, but they said, no, get away from us, Satan. We're not going to invest in Philip Morris. And that's a choice that you make. But I agree with you, Ken. Not all negative, not all positive, but where are the opportunities? By the way, if you haven't dug into it at all yet, 10G is not the same as 5G. We didn't skip 6, 7, 8, and 9G. 10G is a reference to the technologies that are basically going to make a quantum leap in streaming technology. And with all the movies being watched from home, interesting stuff. So we could pick any of these topics to drill into. I'm going to come back after Ken treats infrastructure with a few moments on gaming/gambling. Any final thoughts on this before we get underway, Ken?
No, I'm ready. I'm ready to move on, Mark.
All right, so let's tackle this one.
Okay, well, I started with the idea of infrastructure, and I started just doing some brain storming and coming up with different types of industries that might have something to do with infrastructure. I went to the list of industry names that Morningstar supplies us, and the reason that I went to the Morningstar list is that that's what the Better Investing data happens to be based on. Remember that the list of industries that make up the whole universe of stocks is slightly different depending on your data source. So we'll get a different list from Value Line, a different list from CFRA, that's the old Standard & Poor's. We'll get a different list from Manifest Investing or any data source that we look at. So I just took infrastructure, went down that list and said, I think here's some of the kinds of names that might be used in an infrastructure play. Well, obviously, I'm not going to find a single company that covers all of those different types of things that are coming from all of these different industries. If you're in a club, ask your club what sounds interesting to them, because at the beginning of your narrowing things down, you basically have a lot of free choice as to where you want to go. If engineering and construction sounds like something that your members are interested in, then begin at that starting point. or begin at the forest products starting point. That's certainly going to impact infrastructure. Or begin at farm and construction machinery. Begin at a place where you're interested and where your members would have a little bit of active interest to keep the ball rolling. Next slide, Mark.
Okay, but you put forest products on the slide. That means we have to raise the cost of this presentation.
All right.
All right.
For some candidates, and I picked three candidates at random, and the reason that I picked these three is that they happen to be in three of the portfolios that I'm associated with. Two come from club portfolios and one comes from a personal portfolio. But the candidates are Martin Marietta, Mastech, and Caterpillar. And at this initial stage, when you're starting to try to narrow down from a theme down to a target, remember that you're not necessarily buying any of your initial choices. What you're really doing is you're using some of those initial choices as a jumping off point. If Mastech really sounds interesting to you, or if you don't know anything about it, then it's as good a jumping off point as anything else. And that's what you're using it for. Occasionally, the company that you use as a jumping off point ends up being the very best in its particular niche, and you end up buying it. But more often than not, these jumping off companies lead you to even better ideas. Next slide, Mark. Locate some peers of the companies that you're talking about. Locate some direct competitors if they exist. And I'll be real clear, finding direct competitors for larger companies is sometimes a real challenge. But you can find companies that overlap in their business models so that they compete in some areas, and you can find companies that act as peers. They don't compete with each other, but they run almost exactly the same business model. Focus on high quality. You know what high quality means. Consistent growth in earnings and sales, a reasonable amount of history, earnings. If you're trying to deal with a stock that's going to be part of your core portfolio, then you must have earnings. And it's okay to look at cyclical growth at the same time as you look at classic straight line growth. Cyclical growth means that over time, the company goes to higher highs and higher lows, but they do it in an up and down kind of cycle rather than in a straight line. There's so many sources for peers and competitors. Here's just a few of them. Next slide, Mark. I got this off of the CFRA report for Martin Marietta, and that report was free to me at my Ameritrade broker site. Some of you might find CFRA at your library. Some of you might find CFRA if you go and choose to look at your deep discount brokerages. But this isn't the only source of peer group material, but it's a great source if you can access it. Here's a list of other companies that I might want to look at in addition to Martin Marietta. My eyes sees on Eagle Materials because I happen to know that company. There's another one I know down further, and that's Vulcan Materials. I know those two companies, and the list is replete with companies that I don't know anything about. I might be looking at a hidden jewel, and I don't even know it's a jewel in the first place. Next slide, Mark. CFRA peer group lists look different depending on the report that you're looking at. This report is also from CFRA, but this report has a little bit more information on it. This is peer group comparison, this time peer group for Mastech. And again, I'm looking down this list, And I recognize a whole slew of companies off this list. I recognize AECom and Dicon and Fluor and Jacobs Engineering. All of those companies are names that at one time or another, myself or some of my clubs have taken a look at. So here's a good starting point for a group that might in the long run come up with a candidate that I would want to buy. Next slide, Mark. I love to go to the SSG Plus, and what I do is I don't touch the screener at all. Notice that at the very bottom on the left-hand side, it says traded exchange, and I leave that at USA exchanges only. I know that I'm throwing away a whole slew of Canadian companies, and if you want, you could add the Canadian companies right there as well. And then I just hit search. Essentially what I do is I get a list of the entire database minus the Canadian companies when I do it this way. Next slide, Mark. Once I have that search done and I'm looking down here and I see 5,114 entries, then I start using some of those industry names that I know are interesting as far as my theme is concerned. I'm going to use the word building, for example, because I know that there is an industry that starts with the name building. So over where it says industries, I'm going to start to type building. And I only had to get to the L in building before this list resorted itself with all the building products and equipment companies in a nice long list. Well, now I need something real high tech to sort through this. I use a pad of legal paper and a pen, and I just have to press that button on the left-hand side that I'm taking a look at right there. Next slide, Mark. And when I press that button, I get a thumbnail. And now all I have to do is make a judgment. Is this interesting enough to continue to look at or not? AAON is the ticker. If I want to know what it does, I could press that question mark up at the top and I could get a paragraph about what it does. But I'm just looking at the graph, and the graph is fairly interesting, so I would put it on my list. Remember, I'm not buying any of these companies. I'm not worried about whether or not they're going to end up being in the buy zone. I'm not doing an SSG. I'm just coming up with a list of an interesting company and a couple peers where I can start a study of what's going on. Next slide, Mark. Once you develop the list, think about what you're doing. Be selective. Don't include companies that might be interesting if you already have 2 or 3 that are very interesting. And I'm calling interesting great, nice, parallel, up and straight sales lines and earnings line. I'm looking at most for 2 or 3 strong peers or competitors, and I never would go past 4 or 5. That's too many to try to do a comparison with. If I can come up with one company that kicks it all off and then 2 or 3 strong competitors, I have enough to make a really nice study that's focused within the theme that I'm talking about. One more slide, Mark. Once you have the list, start to study the companies. And as Nicholson said, time and time and time again, choose the best company that you can find. He said that if you continue to add the best company that you can find in a number of different industries into your portfolio, you're going to be a successful investor. So that's what my goal is. Each time as I look at an industry, and yes, it's pretty random as to which industry I'm going to look into. But as I look into it, I'm trying to find the best company. Maybe sometimes I start out with an industry and, I don't find a single company that looks good on the visual analysis. So what do? You don't stay stubborn and say there has to be something good here, but you move to another industry. Your portfolio is only going to have 14, 15, 16, 17 companies in it, and there are literally thousands of companies out there to study. Be selective and buy the best. That's what you're looking for. Next slide, Mark. Well, it seems that we have a doggy right there, huh?
Yeah, we have an intruder alert, apparently. So just a moment to transition, away from core perhaps a little bit. Many of you out there already know that that's the mascot for Dogecoin. If you've been following that in the news at all, I have no idea what the price of Dogecoin is today, but it's been all over the map here in the last couple of weeks. I do know people that bought it at 2 cents and watched it go to 60 cents per coin. So there's some interesting things going on. And then for a bit of trivia, does anybody in the audience, you can answer in the question box, know what that logo represents on the right? Because that's the one that I actually spent some time with learning more about. That happens to be the symbol for Ethereum. And Ethereum is more closely related to blockchain than some of the other cryptocurrencies. And I just find it interesting that they're pretty close to that manifest investing logo in terms of the artwork. So Ken suggested that I let them get a little bit more successful and then send the lawyers over to see what we can harvest there. So no, I'm not going to talk about cryptocurrencies anymore. I just thought it was an interesting moment. We're going to step back just one level from that to this. Now, Ken has been spending a lot of time talking about pretty much the core component of your portfolio. I respect that. I understand that. We're going to talk about some stuff that might be a little bit more suited to the non-core part. You can call it speculative in some ways, but certainly, in some cases, special cases. And what we're going to share here are a number of slides from ARK Investing. The person on the right is Kathy Wood. She is the Chief Executive Officer and Chief Investment Officer and founder of ARK Investing. And they're an investment advisor. This is their cover slide. But I don't know, Ken, have you had a chance to spend any time with this Big Ideas presentation at all from a couple months ago?
Not yet, Mark. Not yet. I've been kind of busy putting a series of 5 classes together and getting them up and running here. So
I'm going to sneak a few pieces out of it as an appetizer, but I do heartily endorse, especially as you're trying to get into some of these headache-inducing topics and themes of the change that is happening, especially in the cyber and electronic world. You can actually go, just Google it and download a copy of the presentation. One of the really cool things about ARK Investing is they are so transparent. They disclose all of their buy and sell transactions. They share analysis of specific companies. They have a continuing series of webcasts and research papers. You'll see some of that as we go, but pretty wild that they are that open. Here's a look at the topics that are covered in that Big Ideas presentation, and if there are a few things on here that just kind of reach out and grab you, I heartily recommend that you take a look at some of the deeper research in the themes. Deep learning is just taking artificial intelligence to a new level. The same thing applies to the data center. Virtual worlds is something that I just can't get my hands around. I mean, I have friends who are buying digital real estate and renting it out to influencers and collecting money. I don't understand it, and I'd like to try a little bit harder to understand it more. Digital wallets, we were just talking about never going to the ATMs anymore. Big topic. Bitcoin, cryptocurrencies. She has basically come out pretty strong in favor of the general topic of cryptocurrency. Electric vehicles, something we'll probably be spending a little bit of time at a future bull session about. Pretty wide topic. Could also be an infrastructure theme right there, Ken. Automation, ride hailing. I like the concepts of delivery drones, 3D printing. I know a guy who was out several years ago with some very disruptive and formative thoughts on 3D printing, basically before a lot of people were talking about 3D printing. Remember those days, Ken?
I certainly do, and I remember the fact that if you're really quick to jump on some of these ideas, you jump onto a dog that dies. So you have to be very, very careful.
Yeah, I mean, I can remember seeing some of the early, the ticker symbol was 3Ds, DDD for 3D systems. And I think what you see with a technology like that, this is just my opinion, Ken, it emerges, it's incredibly exciting, it gets all kinds of press time, and then the media and people kind of walk away and the industry continues to percolate. And I think that's kind of what Kathy Wood is getting to here, that the industry has continued, even though we're basically ignoring it for the most part as a society, it's continued to make advances and it's gaining steam. And again, as an investor in the long term, sometimes fatigue on the part of a nation or world can lead to investing opportunities. So all of that stuff applies. I don't even know what long read sequencing is, so I'm going to have to go in and reread that section of the report. We talked a little bit yesterday about multi-cancer screening with respect to the company, which they do own a stake in, Exact Sciences. We talked about it in the green room a little bit. If you want to see a little bit more about why ARK Investing is extremely interested in Exact Sciences, the company, with the ticker symbol EXAS, we talked about it yesterday, read that section. Read that section and you'll see about what Exact Sciences is doing with Mayo Clinic and some pretty profound work. And then they're also up to at least their knees, if not their shoulders, in all of the genome stuff, all of the high sciences and microbiology and everything that goes on in that area. So again, I would encourage you to take a closer look. They keep it simple. We're going to actually dive into the area of gaming and gambling as we drill into just this, one of these themes, and this theme actually happens to cross many of these sections. Any thoughts or comments, Ken?
Well, just back to 3D printing for just a second, Mark. One of the associated companies that we looked at real carefully back when we discovered DDD was a small French company called Dassault Systems, DESAULT Systems. And Dassault is still around and appearing now on an awful lot of application software lists as one of the prime candidates for driving a lot of this technology, as creating the software that's driving a lot of the advancement in some of these different technologies. So it's just a name. I think its ticker is DST. Don't take that for certain, but the name of the company is Dassault Systems.
Yeah, I'm pretty familiar with them. They have an office right across from the Chrysler, what is now Stellantis, but the Fiat Chrysler corporate headquarters. And the other company that comes to mind, which is also has a high interest level at ARK Investing, is Proto Labs. And I know that's no stranger to many people that are on the call. All right. So here's just kind of a big way of discussing what Ken has already been talking about. You take an idea, you begin, looking at the large environment, what's the umbrella look like? What's the size of the tent that we're talking about? Understanding a little bit better, defining what are they trying to do? What type of field of opportunity is out there? And then you basically go in and start looking for leadership companies. And in the case of some of these topics, you can't find somebody that's been the best for a number of decades because the area hasn't been around that long. The topic hasn't been around that long. So you're looking for companies that are continually improving their position, competitive position, and seizing technology. Now,
Mark, I'm gonna interrupt for just a second. We're getting a really good question here. Can you tell our audience how you found the link on the page before this one, on the slide before this one, slide 17? How did you get to the Big Ideas 2021 slide in the first place?
Well, I can tell you that I heard about it during a webcast, but if you simply Google or DuckDuckGo ARK Investing and Big Ideas 2021, it'll take you right to a link to download it. If you can't find it there, send me an email. I'll be happy to send you the PDF. I have it also. I will attach it in the forum to the thread that goes along with this webcast series also.
Thank you, Mark.
Okay, so they've identified some areas that they really see as disruptive and ripe with potential opportunity. You can read them yourselves. They're into robots. They're into genomes, as we mentioned. They're into using computers and stuff for next level things, like this deep learning stuff. They're also into this e-commerce area. Their flagship fund is known as ARK Innovation. The ticker symbol is ARKK. Full disclosure, I did buy some of it a couple days ago, a couple mornings ago, because I thought they'd been beaten up pretty badly. And again, it's in my non-core investing portfolio, but I have a lot of faith in what they've looked at over time. So let's talk about this area of gaming. I am not a fan. I've never been a big one with Nintendo, and Ken, you used to talk about playing the games with your grandson, and I was envious. You had all kinds of PlayStations, and I can remember when you got that game a few years ago that was more physically involved, and there's just a whole bunch of stuff. That just isn't me, so I have not really paid a lot of attention to the field of gaming, electronic gaming and multimedia and that type of stuff. And then Kim Butcher came along and basically started saying, "Are you seeing some of these trends?" And I'm like, "What do you mean?" She goes, "Well, are you aware that these people come together to watch people play video games in stadiums that are bigger than our major sports?" And I'm like, "Whoa!" And back in just to give some context, how many of you have not been to a Super Bowl party? Well, I mean, the Super Bowl attracts a lot of attention every year, maybe a little bit less than it used to, but we're talking about 100 million people showing up either in person or via television to participate in the Super Bowl. That's a pretty big deal worldwide. Well, these events actually generate those type of numbers. In fact, this year they believe they will surpass the Super Bowl and the World Cup in terms of the audience actually attending events. And I have a hard time relating to watching video games being played on a stage, but it's being done. You see the big screens and the crowds of people. Any thoughts on that, Ken?
Well, yeah, my thoughts are Mark, that I think that the popularity of sports comes from the fact that everybody has, or not everybody, but many people have played sports themselves. They know the skills that are involved. They understand that there is a fair amount of talent involved. And now we're looking at a group of people that have also played these games and understand the amount of brain talent and dexterity that's involved in playing these games. And they appreciate that skill just as much as they might appreciate Jim Brown running through the lines back when I was a 10 or 11-year-old. So I think that the momentum is there to end up with these huge audiences, because I think there's a heck of a lot more kids today playing games than there are actually playing sports. Some of it has to do with the way mothers protect their only child or their only two children, but some of it has to do with the fact that you can walk through a neighborhood a lot of times and not find enough kids to even play a game of pickup basketball anymore, let alone play a game of baseball or football with teams of 8 or 10 or 12 or whatever. So I'm understanding where the audiences are coming from. I'm understanding how the appreciation of playing the game by all of these people can make them spectators.
Oh yeah, I mean there are guys. Ninja. I don't know who Ninja is, but he apparently is greatly skilled and respected worldwide. He probably has a larger fan base than some of my favorite country musicians. It's just it's a different world. Well, here, Kim made the point. She just said to me, they buy stuff, and duh, they buy stuff. So this is what you're basically looking at. Here's a page from that particular report, which encapsulates the size of the opportunity. And by the way, I think these numbers are low. From what I know of sitting down and talking to gamers, I don't know any gamer that does only 1 or 1.5 hours per day. Between the millennials and Generation Xers and many boomers. Um, I think that number might even be a little bit low. But they're pointing out growth rates in the 20s. And they're basically showing you a perspective. Even on the low side, if it's on the low side, it's still a substantial field of opportunity. And that's kind of what we're saying. If you want to hear more about it, one of the things you can do, this is actually a webcast or a podcast that's put out by um, the people at ARK Investing, which talks about with an expert, Will Hershey of Round Hill Investments, about this area. I listened to it last night. It's just fascinating as you learn about what that field of opportunity is and what is going on. It crosses many of the various ETFs that they have at ARK. And again, this is their flagship. This is the one that has the highest number of investments and the largest amount of money. But again, we're talking about next generation internet, fintech, and e-commerce here, and to some extent, even technology and robotics. When we're talking about this subject, it's very cross-sectional, cross-discipline. So 3 facts. I mean, the average U.S. gamer is 35, not 17. More people watch online video than TV. I think that's true in our house. We don't play video games, but we're not watching any TV. And Ken, I think point number 3 is kind of the hybrid of where people who have participated or really enjoy sports. I mean, I played basketball, I played tennis. I get that stuff, and I can make the jump into understanding more about how the esports version of that takes place. And all of these facts are covered in great detail by the World Economic Forum. There's a bunch of articles and white papers on the subject. So again, a big field of opportunity.
Well, Mark, I certainly understand the economic side of it. I'll admit to being a closet gamer from the age of 10 or 11 when we were playing hexagon games, games that involved thousands of pieces of cardboard that you moved around boards, and it progressed to the early Nintendo machines where you moved a single character around essentially a board, only you did it electronically. And today we're playing games with graphics that are extremely realistic, and the experience is very different. But I will tell you that in the depths of the pandemic, I moved into a couple of electronic games just as a way to kind of combat boredom.
Mm-hmm.
And I found that if you wanted to be successful at some of the kinds of games that I was interested in, you had to pour money into those games. You weren't ever going to be successful if you didn't have the right kind of equipment and if you didn't have the right kind of defenses. And to do that, you had to pour money into the darn thing. I'm cheap enough and I have enough self-control to pull back from that kind of enticement. But I personally know people that aren't afraid, even on silly little games like Candy Crush. I know that the competition to gain another level and to get to a higher level than your buddy is intense. And if that means sometimes you have to pay $15 or $25 to get some hints or to get some extra kinds of tools to make your puzzle work, then you do it. So I understand what's driving this, and I think it's primal a lot of times. I wouldn't discount any of this going forward. I think it's an extremely interesting topic, and I think these companies deserve at least our study, if not a place in some of our portfolios.
Absolutely. What I hear you saying is there is a commerce engine alive and well here. One of the things that we have talked about over the years is NetEase, the ticker symbol up at the top of the page, and how it'd be kind of nice to discover the next NetEase, because I believe you're in an investment club, Ken, that bought this like 10 years ago, and it's done nothing
More
to
like
go up.
more like 15 or 18 years ago,
Yeah,
Mark. Now we did sell it about 3 or 4 years ago, and it was a regretful sale.
yeah,
It was a sale made in the heat of the moment, and it should never have been sold from our portfolio. But it's never come back to the place where it's appeared to be a good repurchase. This is a Chinese company that not only creates games internally for the Chinese market, but it also licensed some of the biggest worldwide games for the Chinese market. So at the one particular time, a game called World of Warcraft was extremely popular throughout the world, and NetEase held the Chinese license for that particular online game. So it's these kind of companies, they're out there, and maybe you need to talk to your 16-year-old grandson and find out what the next biggie is, and find out who's publishing it, and where it's coming from, and maybe an industry study based on these kind of companies isn't something that should be sneered at.
right. So the point I'm making here is on the left-hand side of the page is a bunch of electronic and multimedia gaming companies. On the right side of the page, those are gambling companies. And it could come from a source like Finance Yahoo or Big Charts. This one happens to come from Y Charts, and it's kind of an institutional feed that we have at Manifest. But again, they're sorted by the largest in terms of micro cap going down. The ones that are highlighted, in my opinion, this is kind of using Kathy Wood and ARK Investments to cheat a little bit. The ones that they actually own are highlighted. I'd never heard of Skills before. Roblox actually came public recently. I obviously had heard of Nintendo, but I had never heard of, and it's the biggest company out there. The other thing I want to draw the audience's attention to is these profit margins. I hope those are making your eyes water a little bit. Those are huge. On the gaming side, the margins over here aren't too bad either. I mean, when you look at some of these numbers here on the gambling side. So again, you can take this fairly long list of companies. I was up after midnight studying about a company from Malta, CD Projekt, last night, just wondering. And I was driven there by that large profit margin and the fact that it has a PE ratio. Some of these companies actually have PE ratios, Ken. It's exciting.
Well, Mark, one of the biggest investing mistakes that I ever made, the third stock that my wife and I ever invested in was Electronic Arts.
Oh,
My wife has a knack for picking out things that are going to be big, but they're not going to be big for the next 5 or 10 years. She read about gaming, knew that it was something that interested me, and said, let's put some money into this. And we got so excited when Electronic Arts tripled that we sold it. And at that point, we should have been holding that for the approximately 25 years that it would have been compounding. And I'd be maybe not doing these conferences if I still had that block of Electronic Arts to deal with. That certainly was one of the worst decisions that we ever made, to sell it at a triple. Because there's no limit to how much this stock, any stock, can do.
Yeah, you'd be one step closer to adapting me. So I'm basically extending the invitation to everybody out there to pull some of these up. If you see something that's really interesting, share it with the community. Just to give you a feel, drilling into some of the mini industry studies at Manifest, you'll see how few of these companies we cover. And several of these have been added fairly recently. And there is some interesting stuff going on here. Gee, I wonder if there's a reason that Kathy Wood, who has a 5-year long-term perspective and thinks a lot like we do, are interested in all those companies up at the top of this chart. How about discretionary gambling? Again, some companies that have appeared to have some potential. Uh, some of them hide in places like internet content and information. There's your NetEase right there, Ken. Okay, and then one last thing that Ken recommended, there is another area of opportunity that shows considerable promise, and it's right here under the casinos. And Las Vegas Sands is one that Ken has featured in the past at roundtables. And again, the invitation is to everybody to dig into some of those lists or similar lists and try to discover a few of these, because it is an area of potential. And again, it's an area, just a demonstration of digging into a theme. You're not going to find core investing all the time. Sometimes you are going to find speculative opportunities. This is one of Kim's current favorites, Golden Nugget Online Gaming. And the reason that she is interested is they're buying stuff. And if it's a well-managed business and they continue to see stuff being bought at incredibly high rates, at some point in time, profitability is going to come. And like Ken was saying with NetEase and some of the others, Electronic Arts at one point in time looked like this. Sometimes it can make all the sense in the world to, again, take a theme, delve into the specific topic, target some investments with incredible promise and potential leadership, and prosper mightily. Now, they're not all going to work out, but some of these will exceed your expectations. Well, I'm showing 146, Ken. We're a little bit early. We could probably take a few questions. The next session does start in 15 minutes.
I'm looking at our question box. It's clear at the moment, Mark. So I think that this one timed out pretty well for us. So without any questions, folks, we're going to thank you for coming and listening to this discussion of from theme to reality, or from theme to purchase. And we're going to close this webinar down and get ready for the next one in our series, which is on portfolio management. Again, the question box is staying clear, so thank you, folks, and we'll hope to see you at one of the other classes in the series. Good afternoon, everybody.
All right. Take care, all.